are you comfortable making bold requests? Because that is a key to business success. Like, you need to be comfortable asking totally outlandish things of people that have no business saying yes. Get people doing it, do it often, and people are going to say yes a lot more than you anticipate.
If you're an active real estate investor and you're looking to do larger deals, you're in the right place. We are going to go and take the conceptual type of stuff that you listen to from other real estate podcasts and bring it down to the tactical, the nitty gritty, the actual actionable types of things that other real estate investors that went big did to grow their own real estate empire. You're listening to the Go Big Live podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drouin.
What is up, everyone? I'm Matt Drouin, the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I've been following him for a while, Mr. Stewart Beal. Stewart is a serial entrepreneur with an impressive track record in real estate construction, property management, capital raising. His journey began at just 19 when he founded Beal Properties LLC, and he has since established over 20 companies in the real estate and construction sectors. With more than 100 property acquisitions and over 3,000 managed units, Stewart's expertise is a treasure trove of knowledge in the industry. So definitely do not miss the live Q&A after our show today if you're live in the Facebook group. But I want to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Stewart Beal. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So I like to start the show with the same question for everybody. You were born and now you're here. What happened in between?
Okay, great. So yeah, I grew up in a entrepreneurial family. My father was a contractor and my mother was a lawyer. And so this is a business real estate podcast. So we'll start with how I got interested in that. And basically, I was a very serious reader early on. And my father would subscribe at his business to every business magazine. So that's like your Forbes, your Inc. There was Fast Company, those magazines, Detroit Crane's Business. And so when those got old in the office, he would bring them home. So every month I would read 6 to 7 business magazines. And when I read a magazine, I read every article in the entire magazine, cover to cover. And that got me exposed to business and really what are best practices to become wealthy in America. This was back in the 90s. So this was before the internet boom. This was before crypto. This was before like a lot of the stuff that's fashionable right now. Like I want to become a social influencer. Like that wasn't in the magazine. And so what really was in the magazine was 2 things: building a big business and real estate. So it was like real estate and building a big business. So when I was 13, I started a lawn care and landscaping company. And we talked to a lot of guys about how they've done that in their life. But what really got me interested in that business is the concept of recurring revenue. I like involved in businesses that have recurring revenues. The best thing about a lawn care and landscaping company is your customers are, if you're treating them well, customers for life, and they hire you every single month to do the exact same thing, mow their lawn and maintain their landscaping. So I learned early on that contracts are important. Again, my mom was an attorney. She helped first contract. I signed up about 400 contracts between when I was 16 and 17. Wow. And that provided a foundation for selling the business. And when I was 19, I sold the business for $250,000. Wow. So that I got started in business.
Sweet. So you had a kind of a inclination to the SaaS model, the subscriptions and services model, but in the old school way of mowing lawns and that sort of thing. So what was the segue into real estate? Because that's a real estate rental income is basically a services and subscription model. You got to take care of the customer, and then they'll typically stay for quite a long time unless they have a life event where they buy a house and whatever. So what was that segue from lawn care to real estate?
Yeah. Okay, great. It's kind of odd to think about, but a lot of our renters are customers for life. We have people that have, so this 30 unit we were talking about before we started the call, but then that we'll talk about more on the podcast. We have a woman who I bought the property 20 years ago, but she's lived there for 47 years, if you can believe that. And so if you treat her right, you're never going to have to turn that apartment. And that's the key of apartment success, is limiting your terms, or one of the. And so you've got a customer for life, just like if you're mowing your neighbor's lawn. So the way I segued to real estate is I needed a place to live. And I thought it would be a good idea to do what I call a glorified or a supersized house hack. And I enrolled at Eastern Michigan University, wanted to move out of my parents' house, and said, I don't want to pay other people rent. I want to buy a small building and rent it out to my friends, or rent it out to other people. And if you were to ask me today, hey, Stewart, I'm 18, I want to do a house hack, I would recommend that you buy a 3-bedroom home with a basement that you can install an egress window in and make it a 4-bedroom. That would be my recommendation today. That'd be your way in. That way you could get a 30-year mortgage and that thing. But I didn't know about a house hack at the time. I'd never read about that concept. Maybe it wasn't really well publicized back then. This was in 2001. So I just met a guy who had 11 properties. Go ahead and buy any one of these 11. And so I checked out all 11, and just the only property that had a vacant unit in it was a 5-unit. So I ended up buying a 5-unit as my first real estate deal. I lived in 1 unit, and then I rented the other 4 to other people. And that's how that started back in 2001.
Sweet. So let's talk about the big deal. You said a 30-unit.
Yeah. Okay, great. So,
and how old were you?
Yeah, I was 19 when I bought the 5-unit, and the next couple of months were pretty rocky with property management. We could spend 100 hours talking about property management, but I had all the typical learning experiences. So when you're doing lawn care and landscaping, your customers pay you. They never not pay you. I mean, you might only not get paid like 1 out of 5,000 times, where maybe you accidentally do a job for someone who doesn't have money, or there's like a dispute. So your customers pay you. And that's what I've been doing for 6 years. So once I owned an apartment building and my customers didn't pay me, that was very shocking beginning to the start of property management. And so I had to go through all of that process, as I'm sure most listeners know, with being firm for the first time, having to enforce a contract for the first time, evictions, all this. But, it didn't deter me. And I was reading the Ann Arbor News, and back in 2001, people still published classified ads when they wanted to sell an apartment building. And I saw a 30-unit for sale for $600,000. And that was immediately at $20,000 a unit, a very good price. And I called the man, and it turned out he was a Eastern Michigan University professor, and I was enrolled at Eastern Michigan University. And so he thought it was really cool to be selling a building to a student, so much so that he rejected above asking offers and sold me for his asking price of $600,000. But that deal was a big deal. I did not have all the cash. I did not have the wherewithal to borrow the money to get the loan, being only 20 and having just gotten a loan for the last property. My commercial lending officer was like, well, Stuart, buying a 5-unit is entirely different than buying a 30, which he's correct. And then also the reason the sales price was pretty low is there were major problems with the property. There hadn't been any investment in the property in 20 years. And so I didn't really have the construction wherewithal to do the work as well. So that's when I brought in, for the first time, some serious partners to help me do this deal and some serious knowledge. And we raised half the money from an investor, and we brought in a construction manager to help us get the construction and the renovation working. Very big learning curve as well. Growing up where I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I wasn't really exposed to crime, pest control issues, vandalism, abandoned cars, people not paying the rent. So that was like a big eye-opening to me. Like, wow, I grew up in an environment where people kind of had their stuff together and were doing the right thing most of the time and working hard, expanding their horizons and type of thing. And then now that I'm in apartments, Class C apartments, it was a big learning curve. And so that took a lot of work.
So let's back up a little bit in terms of the total capital stack on this thing here. So you had a $600,000 purchase. You had $300,000 in equity you had to raise. Was the equity just for the down payment, or was that for down payment, closing costs, and then some renovation monies for CapEx on top of that? Tell me about the capital stack from day one, how you put that thing together.
Yeah. So I go into every deal trying to do 75% LTV, loan to value. So what that means, if anyone's new listening, you put 25% of the purchase price down in cash and you borrow 25% from your lender. So that on this deal, the math was I was bringing 150,000 cash to the table, borrowing 450,000, but there was a huge expense that needed to happen right away. The parking lot had become so deteriorated, it no longer exists. So apartment complex is in an urban area, which deserves a nice asphalt parking lot. And it was like gone. Weeds were growing up through it. So we reserved 150,000 in CapEx. The bulk of that went to the asphalt parking lot. And then the thing didn't cash flow for a while because every single dollar came out of the property was put right back into the property. And me being 20 years old, I did a lot of the work myself. I was never very skilled, but I did all the grunt work, mowing the lawn and painting and trash outs and running to the store to get the materials for the guy that was doing the skilled work. And so I worked really every day as like a construction superintendent on that property. It was much different than like a 30 unit management assignment where you might get a call saying, "Hey, I've got a 30 unit. It's all occupied. Everyone, can you manage it?" There's a lot. So that's kind of how that started.
Yeah. So you raised the $300,000 from one investor, right?
Myself and one investor. Yep.
Okay. Yourself and one investor. So was this the first time you were raising capital at that point in time in your career?
Yes.
So tell me about what led up to that in terms of how, first and foremost, I mean, I work with people teaching them how to scale into larger commercial deals. Like friends and family is the lowest hanging fruit. Did you go to friends and family first to raise this? Tell us about that process and specificity.
Yeah, exactly. So friends and family as a young investor is, before you have a large track record, is key. You're really not going to be able to raise money from serious people or raise serious money from serious people without either A, knowing them very closely, friends and family, or B, having a really extensive track record where you can show them, "Hey, I've bought 30 units before and made money." So yeah, full disclosure, my first investor was my father, and again, friends and family. Now, he needed an avenue to invest in real estate. He was a contractor, and a lot of construction contractors, just like realtors, they're like working on everyone else's real estate, but they don't invest in real estate themselves. They don't buy real estate themselves. And at the end of the day, if you're not investing in real estate, what do you have? You have nothing. Your construction company is not worth anything at the end of the day because what do you have? You don't have recurring revenue because construction companies don't have recurring revenue, most of them. And you've got an impressive portfolio of past projects that other people own. You don't own them. You just worked 20 years and you don't own real estate. So like a really mutual beneficial thing, much more so than my dad just writing a check. But when you're working with friends and family and they have business track records, your lending officer who kind of laughed at you about a 30 unit the first time you talked to him is now like, "Oh, okay, your partner, your father who's in business for 20 years and has a track record of paying loans is going to personally guarantee this thing along with you. Okay, now we're getting serious." And then the construction manager who we brought in was a friend of my dad's who had experience in the specific needs this property needed. So that was also beneficial for sure. And people say, "Stewart, you're self-made or you're not self-made." What I say is that's really not important. What you need to do in life and in business is take advantage of the opportunities around you. So if you are good at that, you're going to be successful. If you're not going to be successful. It doesn't really matter who you're facing unless you are the one taking advantages of those opportunities. And that's why young people ask me all the time, "How do I get a job?" I say, "Okay, you meet people that are doing the job that you want and start networking."
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people are intimidated by going to friends and family first. So how did that conversation look like with your dad? Full disclosure here too. I mean, I had to raise $300,000 for my first $1 million deal, and there were 4 different people. They were some aunts and uncles and my in-laws. All right. So it was intimidating for me. They were my family, never done a business proposition to them. There's always this sort of thing. Don't mix friends and family with business. I debate that because one thing for sure is your parents, their grandparents made tremendous amount of sacrifices to put you where you are right now. And to not utilize that imbued, let's call it privilege, let's say, which is another word for generational wealth, then you're really not putting the ladder down for the next generation, for your kids and all that stuff. So how did that conversation start as a young person? Were you intimidated by it? And do you remember that conversation when you made this pitch to your dad?
Yeah. Okay, great. So the pitch was pretty scary because of the condition of the property. That a lot of people would have visited that property and run in the other direction. So the key was the low purchase price and the ARV, although I didn't know that term at the time, the ARV of what it could be. And so I was able to make a case that, look, we're going to buy this thing for 600. We're going to put 150 into it, and it's going to be worth like $1 million or $1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be a lot of risk associated, but no matter how bad we screw this up, it's not going to go under 600,000 that we're paying for it. And as evidence of that, here are these other offers that this guy has received that people are willing to pay 700 and 750 for the thing right now. So that was kind of the business case and the convincing. In terms of the scariness of asking people for money, I may have felt that at some point, but that was just like so long ago that I don't really remember it. But I was talking to a family friend. He's 20.
Mm-hmm.
He for life advice, career advice. And one thing I asked him is I said, are you comfortable making bold requests? Because that is a key to business success. Like, you need to be comfortable asking totally outlandish things of people that have no business saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
Get people doing it, do it often, and people are going to say yes a lot more than you anticipate. And so I've just kind of kept that in mind and made bold requests just every day of my career.
Excellent. I love that. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about maybe, because I want to get to the case study B in the larger 400 plus unit deal, but what were some of the battle scars that you earned in the process and what you learned in terms of bullet points on this deal and what this deal did for you today where you stand right now?
Great. Yeah. So this deal led to many successes and a couple of failures in my career. The key to a successful real estate project is who is actually going to manage this property on a day-to-day basis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get everything right except that and fail big time. And what I learned from this is that I am personally excellent at managing really class B, class C properties. But what I've learned in my career is that I'm also really excellent at buying many of them and then asking other people to manage them. And those people were not equally excellent. And therefore the project failed, even though we did everything else correctly. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say fail, again, it's real estate's the most forgiving business in the world. And that's why you should invest in it. You can screw up a project and still sell it for more than you paid for it, which is what I mean by failure. I'm not talking about selling a ton of properties for a loss and losing a bunch of equity. I'm talking about just not succeeding as well as you thought you would and not running the business model as well as I thought. So this property gave me a lot of confidence that, okay, look, me and my team, we can turn around any class C property that we get our hands on. But that's really not true because you need to keep adding more and more members to the team. And when you have a super robust team, 50, 60, 70 people, now all of a sudden you're having some less quality people, obviously, just because you have so many people. And if those people are managing the most difficult projects, then you're not going to succeed as well. So it led to a lot of successes. We bought a ton of Class C properties over the years, just like that one. And it led to a couple, kind of overconfidence, I would say. And you just got to be careful about that when you're investing is, okay, we're going to buy this really tough project. And I know I could turn it around, but I can't manage every one of them. Who's going to manage it instead of me? And if the answer is, well, we don't know, then you got to be cautious.
100%. So let's fast forward a bit to the I guess the Moby Dick. That was the 400 plus unit deal that you took down. Where was that in your career, and how did that deal come to you in terms of its origin, either off market through a broker or direct to seller relationship, a classified ad? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So a couple of steps. So from 2001 to 2008, I bought a property a year. Mm-hmm. Maybe in 2007, I bought like 2 properties. And then when the foreclosure crisis hit, I started buying a property a month. And then the foreclosure crisis stretched on for so long, 4, 5, 6 years where I live, that I ran out of my own personal cash to buy more properties, but prices were actually going down and down, not up still. So I was like, how do we keep this train going where we're buying these properties that are going to be worth 5 times, what we're paying for them at some point? And so that's when I started working with some investors. And we bought a 14 unit office building as my first investor deal. The purchase price was a multi-investor deal, I should say. The purchase price was $180,000 approximately, and we had to put in about 50, and 4 of us put in like 15 each, basically. Mm-hmm. When that started going, well, a couple of the partners that were involved in those deals, we wanted to make an official real estate syndication business. Mm-hmm. And we started in 2015, 2016, and we raised $2.5 million. Then we raised $5 million. Then we raised $20 million. And then we raised $50 million from investors as a real estate syndication. And the biggest deal, the culmination of all of this work over the years, was in our 4th fund where we raised $50 million. In order to deploy $50 million in a reasonable time frame, you can't be buying 20 units and 30 unit apartment buildings like I had in years past. And so structured that fund to buy 100 unit and up apartment buildings. And we bought a dozen of them, 100 unit, 154 unit, 200 unit, 210 unit, 250 unit. But then a broker saw us doing that, and he called and said, look, Stewart, I've got this really weird deal in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I'm like, I live in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I know, that's why I'm calling you. And he's like, and it's University Green. I was like, oh my God, I live 2 miles from there. I can get to that property in about 5 minutes. He was like, yeah. So the reason I'm calling is because this property is owned by a guy in California that owns 10,000 apartments. He's an amazing apartment guy, but this property has gone through 3 different management changes, and it's just completely out of control. Crime, horrible. And I was like, yeah, I've heard of the property. I read about it in the news a lot. And he said, so I'm having a hard time selling it to other people. And I said, well, I think this is like the perfect project. It's exactly like the 30 unit that I bought, my second deal, with all the same problems, but it's 468 units. So we can really hit a grand slam with this thing if we get it right. And so we talked to all the stakeholders, our investors, my partners at the GP and the syndication, potential lenders. And for the very first time, put together a fully written business plan, PowerPoint presentation of what we're going to do to this property. It was impossible to convince everyone with just like, here's the pro forma, like a smaller deal or a less tough deal. Like, here's the pro forma. Obviously it's going to work. Like we put out like a whole branding, and we put out everything we're going to do, all the marketing we're going to do, the security, which was huge. We installed a $100,000 security system, all this stuff. And we were able to convince everyone that we could do it. And we made our offer, and we were in 3rd place, which was devastating to me. And I was told that the first buyer went into contract, and they were on the path to closing when there was a very brutal murder on the property, made regional news. Murder started in the apartment and all of a sudden it's in the streets. And it was just like a atrocious thing.
Uh-huh.
The first buyer dropped out. And then the second buyer got into contract, and there was a fire at the property that took down 44 units. Now you're at a 468 unit apartment building. Now we're down 44 units.
Mm-hmm.
So that second buyer dropped out. And so we get the call saying you went from third to first place. We got into contract in the deal, and there was another murder and another fire. And so our lender got really spooked, and we had to spend a ton of time convincing the lender. It was a bridge lender. So we were talking to the actual people that are going to lend the money.
Yeah.
And not some robot type of lender. We were able to convince them that no, these problems were anticipated. Read the PowerPoint presentation we put together 3 months ago. Like, we've got a plan to stop the fires, stop crime, and put it together. And so we ended up closing on a 468 unit for $18 million approximately in 2018. And if you do the rough math, you can tell it's a very good per unit price.
Yeah.
And again, just like the 30 units that I had bought for my second transaction, that was the attractiveness of the price. And since the property was just a couple miles from our office and a couple miles from our house, we were able to really hit a grand slam on the operations. If this property were 5 hours away and you could only go see it once a month, we wouldn't have done it, and we wouldn't have been able to convince investors and lenders to do it. It was tough. But since it was so close and we had all our best people on it and we were able to really manage it, and I was able to personally be involved a lot, we really hit a grand slam. And I think when we bought it, it was 83% occupied. But once we really got in there, it dipped down to like 75% occupied. But after 18 months, we actually got it 100% occupied for a small stretch. And then when COVID came in March 20, I believe. And our bridge loan was expiring in April 2020. We said, okay, like, how are we going to refinance this in COVID? And we just got a random offer from a guy out of New York for more than 30 million. And we had paid 18 million for it. And so we elected to take some chips off the table and sell the property to like de-risk our fund, de-risk it from COVID. And also we had some other projects we wanted to invest in within the fund. And so we bought the property for about 18 million. We put about 2 million into it, and then we sold it for over 30 million. And so that was the big deal, the big grand slam in my career.
Sweet. After the recorded version of this podcast, I want to go into some of the details, like on the granular management, tactical strategies, that sort of thing that you employed on turning that property around, because I can relate. The first property was put on was a 720 unit deal right after there was a triple homicide on the property. So I'm very curious to hear about that and kind of like the tactical type of stuff you use. But I want to give a chance. You're doing a raise right now is it a fund or a specific deal right now?
Yeah. So right now we're raising $10 million to invest in apartment buildings. The organization I did that huge deal with, we ended up selling all of our properties throughout COVID. Some of my partners wanted to sell, some of the investors wanted to sell. And so when people want to sell, what do? You sell if you can get a good price. So we sold every single property, all 130 apartment complexes we bought with that organization right before interest rates were raised. Good timing on that. And so then I formed a new organization called Beal Capital, which I'm the only partner in the business. And we are doing it at slightly smaller scale than that huge deal because we had a really strong partnership and those people are involved in the business now. And so we're raising $10 million to invest in apartment buildings in what I call mid-size, which would be like 30 to 100 unit apartment buildings. And then we're also raising a second fund called Beal Fund 3, which we're investing in flexible office buildings. Purchased 3 buildings so far, a 16,000 square foot building, a 17,000 square foot building, and then a 12,000 square foot building. And we're on the hunt for the fourth building while we're finishing up raising the money. And both those funds are closing at the end of the year. I only like to keep funds open for a period of time. And then probably in first quarter 2024 or second quarter 2024, we'll launch a new fund and a new strategy based on where we're at. So if people are listening, want to invest now, we can accommodate that. If they want to know us, follow us, and then consider investing in the next thing, that's also good too. And then also, those are the syndications. I'm sure there's some non-accredited investors listening. We also work with non-accredited investors where we make them a partner in the deal. And then we do smaller deals, more risky, more construction heavy deals a lot of the time. So for instance, if you want to invest in a historic redevelopment, we're close to purchasing a 7,000 square foot building in downtown Ypsilanti, about a block from my house. We're going to have to raise $1,000 to do it. So if you're interested in that kind of construction heavy, probably no cash flow for a couple of years because this thing's really serious, intense work type of investment. When it comes with tax credits, it comes with the depreciation, it comes with a lot of the other benefits of real estate. So if you're interested in that too, reach out.
All right, sweet. And where do they find more information on your funds?
Yeah, so bealcapital.com is our website, and you can email me at sbeal@gobeal.com, and also find me on Facebook, find me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely put that information in the show notes as well. So if you are listening right now and you want to get on a live action Q&A with absolute real estate beasts, titans like Stewart Beal, Reed Goosens, Gino Barbaro, Matt Faircloth, Ashley Kerr, you got to get in live with our Go Big Live Real Estate Investors group on Facebook. So definitely search for it, request to join. I'll let you in so you can get a live Q&A and interact directly with our guests. Also, for the first time, I'm actually asking for this. If you're enjoying this show, please give us an honest rating and review. It helps us attract guests like Stewart. There's some people that are on our target list to get as guests as well that want to see our reviews up higher in terms of number of them. So definitely be sure to do that on the podcast platforms, especially Apple Podcasts. That helps us tremendously. So please do that. I appreciate it. And for now, we're signing out. Thanks for coming on, Stewart.
Thank you.